We've heard premiers asking people to buy Canadian or cancel vacations to the States. And our first question picks up on that. It's from Brenda Davis-White. She's in North Saanich on Vancouver Island. And she asks, how can the average Canadian assist during this trade crisis? Janice, I'll put that one to you.
Yeah, and to be clear, it's not really my job to tell a consumer what to do here, but you're right. There have been premiers pointing out how helpful it is if people support their own during this time. Read the labels in the store, think carefully about the power of their own spending. Maybe think about a business in your community that will be affected by not being able to sell as much into the States. Maybe your business is what could make the difference in terms of keeping them from having to relocate or close doors or lay people off. You're right, there have also been premiers suggesting that people consider their travel dollars, perhaps playing tourist closer to home for the time being. And the risk to American companies is that these things become habits, that you discover new things domestically and may not make as many American purchases down the road. But I also think, in terms of being prepared to help, taxpayers also have to brace themselves here. If more of the governments involved, for example, start buying Canadian instead of putting their contracts out to tender in the US or something, that could result in things like infrastructure projects costing more. You might have to be willing to withstand that. And also, if they have to step in to help businesses and households like they did during COVID to weather this storm, that is something that ultimately comes back on the purse that taxpayers have to shoulder.
And Janice, I should point out to people that there are two sets of tariffs here, right? That President Trump announced tariffs on Canadian exports to the United States. And then Prime Minister Trudeau announced last night that there'd be retaliatory tariffs. And we'll see those in two steps. And we saw a list today of that first group, meat, dairy, some other products. As you looked at that list, Janice, what was the significance of what was on there?
Well, we've all been busily sort of taking what are really kind of dense codes on this long list and trying to figure out what states they were trying to hit with those particular brands that are so associated with politics. There are over 7,400 different kind of codes, and over 1,200 of them appear on this list, but it's kind of a bit of a puzzle for us as reporters to match them up. But a lot of stuff hitting Ohio, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, bourbon, right? And it is all the brands you're thinking of, the Harley motorcycles, the Jack Daniels, but a lot of farm products. And we know how politically important farmers are to Donald Trump. I would really watch that space.
And on Cross Country Checkup today, we got lots of questions from people worried about, in one case, a doctor talking about medical equipment. In another case, the owner of a construction company worried about equipment he might purchase. The key is, will a product be on that list of imports into Canada, which will have the tariffs attached? And that will answer those questions. And we'll learn a lot more in the next few days. Let's go on to our next question for this program now from Sam Yanisic. He responded to CBC via TikTok. Wait, our dollar is going to go down? Isn't it 67 cents? How much lower can it go? Jason, you're a financial planner. Do you have the answer and how much lower it can go?
Well, it's tough to say. We've already seen a pretty significant decline in the Canadian dollar since the fall, from 75 cents down to 68 cents currently. The last time we saw the dollar this low was 2016, but that was temporary. The last time we really saw an extended period of time where the dollar was this low was back 2003. There was about a 5-year period where the Canadian dollar was exceptionally weak. But if you look back, Ian, over the last 50 years, the Canadian dollar has only been weaker 10% of the time, and primarily around that sort of turn of the millennium period. So, most of the time, the Canadian dollar has not been this bad. Could it get worse? Sure, it could. Would I panic? Would I, be buying US dollars in order to hedge against continued declines? I don't think so. And this isn't just a Canada-US dollar story. Foreign investors tend to buy US dollars when there's risk in the world, and the US dollar has actually risen against several currencies, not just the Canadian dollar. The trend may continue, but it really depends how far this situation escalates and how the two countries continue to respond.
Let's go to a question now that was sent in to us on video.
My name's Doug Beckett. I live in Ottawa, Ontario. And my question is, does Congress have to approve any of Trump's tariff measures? And if it's just at his whim as an emergency, is there any scrutiny or set of a criteria applied to what constitutes an emergency?
So, Martina, even Canadians have learned about the separation of powers and about the executive branch in the United States and the legislative branch. So, President Trump has issued these orders. Can Congress do something here?
Well, to directly answer Doug's question, it doesn't need to approve them. It's an executive order, and the legislation under which President Trump has issued these executive orders gives him quite a lot of power. And so with a stroke of a pen, these tariffs will go into place. Now, there are ways in which Congress could intervene and also the courts could intervene. Generally, I think the consensus is that Congress is very, very unlikely to intervene. There's not enough Republicans that do not support, or we think do not support, President Trump's measures. So that wouldn't really be an avenue. And of course, the court's avenue would be very, very uncertain. And so I think that while in theory some checks do exist, I think in practice we're unlikely to see those materialize.
Okay, let's get another question that came to us via TikTok. This one from Jess Bargain. Don't we have a free trade agreement that this would be violating? Janice?
Yeah, we sure do. It's called NAFTA, or as Donald Trump renamed it, right? USMCA, or in Canada we call it CUSMA, called it the best deal ever. And now officials at the briefing today pointing out that yes, that move yesterday is a violation. That's part of the reason why they're rethinking some of the concessions that Canada made, trying to rebalance the playing field with the steps they're taking today. They do have an appeal mechanism under CUSMA where they could go back to the US and say, hey, you're breaking the rules. But would they care any more about sort of, upholding the appeal part of the deal than they did the main idea of NAFTA, which is tariff-free trade in North America? Canada also announced today it's going to appeal to the World Trade Organization, but the Trump administration, even the first time round, was pulling back from using any of the dispute resolution processes in Geneva. So it's not clear that that will work, although they're kind of upholding a principle in doing that. The space to watch is whether this leads to an eventual end of NAFTA altogether. Mexico's president kind of opened the door to that on Friday. We're not there yet, but if this escalates, that is something I'm watching.
Our next question is from Toronto.
Hi, I'm Jared. I'm in Toronto. I'm just wondering, are grocery prices going to get more expensive because of the trade war?
Jason, financial planner, what do you think?
Well, I mean, they sure could. Tariffs could have an immediate increase on prices of a lot of things that we're importing from the United States. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce actually estimated that the 25% tariff could cost the average Canadian household about $1,900 more on an annual basis. In some cases, there might be alternatives, substituting, as we talked about, domestic goods for imported ones, but in a lot of cases, there's not going to be. And I think that the key thing to remember is this is not a permanent price increase. This is not, the type of inflation that we saw coming out of the pandemic where prices went up and have not really gone down. This could be temporary. It could be weeks. It could be months. It's hard to say. But for now, I think we need to brace for higher prices and consumers need to prepare accordingly.
Hello, The National. My name is Jihao Yang, and I'm a grade 12 student here in Coquitlam, British Columbia. My question is, as devastating as they will be, could the now newly confirmed U.S. tariffs be a chance for the economies of Canadian provinces to better integrate? Is it possible that a decade from now, Canadians might thank Trump for making Canada stronger and consolidating our identity as a nation?
What are you hearing about that, Janice?
Yeah, I have been covering interprovincial trade barriers for almost my entire life as a journalist up here, which I'm afraid to say is well over a decade now. Anita Anand is the latest minister tasked with trying to lower these barriers. She had a meeting just last Friday, actually, with the trade ministers from all the provinces and territories, trying to look at things like regulations, safety rules, professional credentials, all the things that economists tell us are really holding Canada's economy back. The problem is, I feel a little bit kind of like with Charlie Brown and the football. I've been here before. I've heard people talk about this problem at length. They never seem to be able to do anything about it. Is Donald Trump the guy that finally gets it done? I do not know. But you know what? Across the history of Canada, this has always been the problem right since our founding. It's easier for people to trade north-south with their neighbor that might only be an hour or two away than it is to trade across a huge country. And we have a lot of transportation infrastructure problems. It's expensive, not very many companies competing for that business. You know, infrastructure needs to be improved. Premiers have been talking about that for years. Do we finally do something about it now? I don't know.
By the way, I live my life constantly in fear of Lucy pulling away that football from me. Here's a question that was sent by Ryan Hinton in Victoria. I'm concerned about how the U.S. tariffs will affect my current and future financial investments, including mutual funds and various stock portfolios, GICs, real estate, etc. Wonder if I'm going to put this question to Jason. Jason, go ahead.
Let me look into my crystal ball, Ian. You know, stock markets were down modestly on Friday. Futures markets for tomorrow's opening are pointing towards a slight decline. So there's really been no major stock market reaction yet. I think if you're a long-term investor, Ryan, adding to your investments, I mean, a downturn would just be a buying opportunity. I don't think I would change anything as a result of this. If you're a retiree, I mean, hopefully you're in a position where you're withdrawing 2, 3, 4, 5% from your portfolio, such that, you know, most of it is coming from dividend and interest income and not capital. So you're not going to be forced, hopefully, to sell anything at a big loss. If you're saving for a short-term goal, say you need this money in the next couple of years and you're going to withdraw all of it from your investments, you know, I think I would consider taking some money off the table, not because I'm worried that stocks are going to fall, but because it's too short a time horizon for the stock market and stock market risk at any time. So I think this highlights the risk of also only investing in Canada or only in North America, and why a Canadian investor needs to have a global stock allocation. It makes more sense now than ever. So if this is the sort of thing that causes somebody to reevaluate their risk tolerance, so be it. Would I be making a change just because of these tariffs? No.
And we have time for one more question.
Hi, I'm Ryan. We live in Toronto. We were wondering what the fastest way to end this trade war would be.
And Martina, who better than the New York Times to tell us how quickly we can end this? What's your guidance on that?
Yeah, no pressure. Look, I think this is the hardest question, and I think the answer is not going to satisfy anyone. We just don't know. We don't really know what the ultimate goal that President Trump has in mind is beyond the question around borders and immigration and fentanyl. We don't know how much pain these measures will inflict on Americans. And I think that will really be the decisive factor. If the measures and countermeasures and the escalation of the trade war in North America starts hurting Americans in key places a lot and quickly, there is a good chance that these measures could be taken back. If not, this could be our future for a while.
Great answer. Thanks to all of you, Martina, Janice, Jason. Really interesting hearing your answers.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much.
Okay.